All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We are very grateful to have you all here today, whether in person or virtually. My name is Andrea Sellers. I am the Assistant Director for Regional Engagement with NC State's Alumni Association. This is our first in-person event after a long year and a half of virtual programming. So I want to thank you all for bearing with us through all of the kinks in the rug. That being said, I am here on behalf of the NC State Alumni Association, and anybody who is interested in getting involved or coming to any future in-person or virtual or hybrid events, I want to encourage you to ensure that your information is up to date with us and that you are members of our NC State Northeastern Counties Alumni Network Facebook page. Now that's enough of me talking. I'm very excited to introduce Mr. Clark Twitty, the president of Twitty & Co. Thank you.
I know we're on camera and I know nobody is here to hear me talk tonight. So this is going to be real simple. My job was just to make a good introduction to a couple of folks. I want to thank Wolfpack Nation for being here. It's a tagline. I know when we talk about think and do the extraordinary, I really do believe that you being here tonight and the willingness of the university team to engage with us, and I hope all of us, is really thinking and doing the extraordinary. I was up in Washington, D.C. last week. I chatted with Senator Burr, and I heard a lady describe Washington, D.C. as a city that was torn between principles and outcomes. And that's really resonated with me. And I think here on the Outer Banks, we're in that same position right now. Everybody in this room is wiped out. We sit in traffic. We're on the very cutting edge of an economy that has never been more explosive in terms of its potential. And at the same time, we reconcile that as a community with a workforce and an infrastructure that has never been under such strain. And who in this room can disagree with that? So long story short, several years ago, we went up to the College of Natural Resources and we said, please help us, because we can't answer these questions, because we feel the tyranny of what are essentially long-term problems, and we struggle to deliver short-term solutions to what are long-term problems. And we hope that this is only one step in what becomes an enduring partnership with North Carolina State. And with no further ado, because nobody wants a monologue with witnesses, Dr. Aaron Seekamp, come on up here. You are the interim head of the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management. Welcome to the Outer Banks. I hope you empty your wallet out while you're here.
Thank you. My best. Thank you, Clark, for that introduction and warm welcome. I didn't realize something was happening behind me.
We were just trying to stop it.
Okay. So as Clark said, I'm Dr. Aaron Seekamp. I am the interim department head of the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management. Andrea Sellers, who was just up here, is one of our graduates. We also have Jake with us here, and Hayes, I saw you. There you are. Anybody else a graduate of the Department of Parks, Recreation, Tourism Management? No? Well, I'm pretty thrilled that there's 3 of us here tonight. And here we are to talk about Dr. Whitney Knollenberg. But I just want to thank Twitty & Company first. We're really grateful for our growing partnership to support the community and further research on sustainable tourism in the Outer Banks region. I'm here on behalf of Dr. Myron Floyd, who is the Dean of the College of Natural Resources, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. But I feel like this is a great honor for me. Dr. Whitney Knollenberg has been an amazing colleague, and she's really pushing the envelope on tourism research at NC State. And so this is such a great honor to be here. I'd also like to thank the NC State Alumni Association for partnering with us to host this event. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the College of Natural Resources, as I spoke with many of you, you're from many different colleges. Just a little bit about us is we are trying to be a world leader in the sustainability and stewardship of the planet that we share. And for almost a century now, we have served vital industries in North Carolina, including the state's largest manufacturing sector, forests and wood products, with more than 500,000 forest landowners. And our topic this evening, though, is something that's emerging as one of the key things that NC State's College of Natural Resources can provide is the state's largest service sector, which is tourism, and trying to create more sustainable tourism for our communities. The College of, in the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management, one of our goals is to understand the role and contribution of tourism in the social, cultural, environmental, and economic well-being of communities worldwide. And our research is conducted at international, national, and regional scales. And we're really trying to support management strategies and entrepreneurial innovations that improve destinations' competitiveness, while also conserving their natural and their cultural resources and promoting the sociocultural integrity of the communities and the residents who live within them, as well as stimulating economic development. Through our partnership with Twitty and Company, Dr. Knollenberg lived in Kerala, and I'm very, very jealous of that fact, for 2 months. And she got to speak with residents, businesses, and stakeholders across the region, allowing her to gain a better understanding of the tourism-related challenges and to identify future research opportunities. Tonight, we have the pleasure of hearing directly from her about the outcomes of the work that she's been conducting this summer. She is committed to advancing hospitality, tourism, and sustainability, and to support North Carolinians. And her research really focuses on the role of leadership in planning policies and partnerships that facilitate sustainable tourism development. And as she's been working here in the Outer Banks, I would be amiss to mention that she has other projects out here in the Outer Banks too that are ongoing. One of them is working with the communities of Hatteras and Ocracoke in their recovery from Hurricane Dorian and trying to plan for a more resilient future for those communities through grassroots initiatives and community-driven responses. She is also working on the development of an oyster trail throughout coastal North Carolina. And so if you love oysters, she's somebody to love, because maybe you'll get to go on an adventure and go oyster harvesting with oyster farmers and harvesters, and also work with the communities who serve oysters to tourists. And so she really conceptualizes tourism as a sustainable development strategy for communities and seeks to engage multiple stakeholder groups in her research to really understand the impacts of tourism. And in addition to all the research that she does, this extension work where she works directly with communities and tries to give back to them, and teaching, she also serves as the Emerging Leaders Committee for the International Travel and Tourism Association, supporting young professionals in the field. And I heard that she just had lunch with Hayes yesterday, so she's living proof of this, that it's not just something that she does to put on her CV. She has a bachelor's from Michigan State University in Parks, Recreation, Tourism Resources, a master's of science from East Carolina University in Sustainable Tourism, and a PhD from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University in Hospitality Tourism Management. So we're really honored to have her as part of our college, as part of our Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management team, and we look forward to hearing more about her work on sustainable tourism here in the Outer Banks. Thanks, Whitney.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Erin, thank you so much for that fantastic introduction. You covered a lot there, and I do love every minute of what I do, but really my favorite part are these sort of evenings. I love connecting with those who work every day in this industry, an industry that is so important, not just to the Outer Banks, but to the state of North Carolina. And my role as an assistant professor in the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management gives me the opportunity to help solve problems. And as Clark mentioned in his statement, there's a lot of things to think about out here across the state, across our country, across the world. The wonderful things that tourism can do needs to be balanced with the things that are not so great about tourism. And so I'm very excited to have been able to spend the past 2 months working here in the Outer Banks in partnership with Twitty and Company. Clark, Miles, Andrew, Jen, everyone from the Twitty family, thank you so much for everything you did for me, as well as my husband, Hunter James, who is here with me for the 2 months in Kerala. We had a wonderful time, and living here with tourism for 2 months taught me so much. Those of you who live and work here in the Outer Banks, this summer is different. It feels different, but there are a lot of things that are typical, right? The traffic, when you go to the grocery store, hint, it's not on a Sunday afternoon. I learned that real quick. These things are things that you have come to adapt to and learn. And I learned them too this summer. So I have a very new perspective on things that I teach, on the way that I research. And so I'm very appreciative of the time that I had here in the Outer Banks this summer. And I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. We have a wonderful mix of people. We have some folks that I spoke with. We have alumni, even a couple of students that I used to teach. Hayes Boone, Jake Worthington, you all are in familiar places right now, me up here going blah, 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 and you guys listen in for a while, right? I am thrilled to be up here to share what I have done this summer, and just want to give a final thanks to our College of Natural Resources for supporting this event, our Alumni Association. Can we please get a round of applause for Andrea Sellers for this event? Andrea, thank you so much. As Erin mentioned, she is an alum of our program, and we are so proud to have you as a part of the PRT family. Andrea, thank you. Thank you very much. So without further ado, I would love to get started to share with you a little bit about what I did this summer. Think back, right? In elementary school, middle school, what was the first assignment you had when you got back from summer break? What I did this summer. Well, that's what I'm going to share with you all today, to tell you a little bit about sustainable tourism and its future in the Outer Banks. Maybe, if I can get my slides to advance. Hold tight. Yes, I turned it on. Maybe not. All right, well, we might have to move the laptop up here or move me down there. Hold on, sorry, y'all. Oh, there we go. I got it. Or maybe Ben moved it, but we'll figure it out. Okay, very good. So, state of tourism in the Outer Banks. We know that tourism here in the Outer Banks is an important economic driver, something that keeps our communities moving forward with income, with revenues, with jobs. Visitors come to the Outer Banks for many, many reasons, right? We have beautiful natural resources here in the Outer Banks. This beautiful ocean, beautiful beaches that we're here looking at today. This keeps people coming and have them coming for a long time. The work of our excellent destination marketing organizations, the Outer Banks Visitors Bureau, the Currituck Office of Tourism, the Ocracoke Tourism and Development Authority, have done an excellent job of promoting these natural resources, these cultural resources, these special, unique things that keep people coming to the Outer Banks. And people love the Outer Banks so much that they keep coming back, right? Year after year, same week, same house. They love it, and they've loved it for a very long time. When they come, they don't come alone. They come with family, they come with friends, they bring grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole family together to enjoy this wonderful, special place. And they've come to know and love it, and they've come to have certain expectations of what their experience here in the Outer Banks should look like, what they love about this place. And we've seen this seasonal demand over time, right? We just talked about how busy it is here in the summer. Lots of traffic, lots of people, everyone in one place at one time. So we have that high peak summer season, and we're starting to see more travel in those shoulder seasons, which has been really helpful to extend those good economic benefits that we get from tourism. Then we get the pandemic. Thanks, Ben. Go ahead. So 2020 happens and things change. Things change for everyone, right? It's a very different time. But here in the Outer Banks, we saw things change rapidly once those bridges opened and we had people coming back. We saw record levels of visitation. More people here than ever before. More people coming, more people to enjoy our beautiful natural resources, enjoy the unique culture and feel of this place. But we started to see some negative impacts. We started to see that there were going to be shortages in our workforce, in our supply chain. things were going to be disrupted and changed. We couldn't keep operating the way we typically did. Along with that, we saw an increased demand for real estate. And so we started to see things like, Ben, if you'll click one ahead for me there, like this. This look familiar? Help wanted sign. I like that it says OBX Life under it because it's the way it feels right now, right? Go ahead, Ben, another one. We saw a lot of this, a lot of that. You drive up and down 12, you drive up and down the bypass, you see a lot of these signs. Unfortunately, we saw this sign as well. Anybody recognize this? Sandbars Bar and Grill, one of our wonderful local restaurants in Kill Devil Hills, couldn't keep functioning, couldn't keep operating as normal because of the workforce shortage. They had to close permanently. And this is a great example, Ben, if you'll go back one for me, a great example of the struggle that we're having with sustainable tourism. A closed business is the most unsustainable business. This is not anything new though. This is something that we've been seeing, maybe not at these levels, maybe not with these impacts like we saw with sandbars, but we've been seeing it for a very long time. It's something that has been a constant problem. Clark mentioned the long-term challenges that we face here in the Outer Banks. And we're really seeing that come to a head. We're seeing that come to a threshold this summer when we have this incredible level of demand. More people wanting to be here, more people wanting to spend money in our hotels, at our restaurants, but they can't because we have a shortage. And these impacts, go ahead, Ben, are something that we need to think about changing. If we are going to continue with tourism the way it's been, the status quo, the way it has been for a long time, things have worked well, right? We've had high levels of visitation. We've done a great job of getting people here, but these impacts are starting to become too great for all of us to manage. So we're seeing with more people coming, we're seeing increased pressure on those natural resources, more people on our beaches, more crowding, more trash, things that maybe make these places, our places that people love to visit, not as great as they were the first time around. We have more people waiting in line to get into our wonderful cultural resources, like Currituck Lighthouse, Jockey's Ridge State Park. We saw a 26% increase in visitation to our national parks here in the Outer Banks. 26%. We weren't ready for that, and it is a lot to handle. We're also seeing at the same time greater negative impacts on our social resources. And when I say social resources, I mean all those things that people who live and work here in the Outer Banks deal with every single day, whether it's traffic, whether it's being able to find a spot on the beach where you want to enjoy being here in the Outer Banks as a resident, whether it's when you go to the grocery store, right? These things are those social impacts that maybe make it not the best place to live, things that we have to deal with that really kind of start to rub us raw. So those social impacts are incredibly important to think about for the folks who live here and work in the Outer Banks. All of these challenges underscored by the fact that there's a potential to leave money on the table. Leave money on the table because we see people who are not able to operate at full capacity, people who are not able to bring in as many guests as they would like to, because we have some issues with that supply and the workforce that I mentioned earlier. These diminished economic resources are further challenged by the fact that those experiences that people have and have come to know and love in the Outer Banks, whether it's visiting their favorite restaurant, whether it's taking the kids to the aquarium, those experiences have changed. Think of how long people wait in line at the restaurants. Think of how people may have to wait for that 4 o'clock check-in in their home, right? These are those impacts on experiences that people remember. And they talk about those things. And what do we think travels faster? Positive word of mouth or negative word of mouth? Blake's nodding over here. Blake knows what travels faster. It's negative word of mouth, right? What we want to maintain is that high quality experience, the things that people love about the Outer Banks that keep them coming back year after year and telling all of their friends, neighbors, and loved ones how fantastic this place is. But we don't have the resources to do that right now. And I want you to ask yourself, this future of potentially unhappy guests, a lower quality experience on our beaches, potentially negative impacts on things that affect our everyday life, like traffic, right? Is that the future that we want for tourism in the Outer Banks? Is that where we want to be? Think about that. Now, go ahead, Ben. I want you to close your eyes. We all trust each other. We all trust each other in here. Close your eyes. Thank you, Clark. Thank you, Chris. Close your eyes. And I want you to picture what you want for the future of sustainable tourism in the Outer Banks. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does that future look like? Okay, you can open your eyes. Thank you. Good for playing along. Thank you for doing that. You guys make it fun. So my task this summer, go ahead, Ben, was to think about how do we get to that future? How do we get there? How do we accomplish that future that we want for tourism in the Outer Banks? How do we move beyond these long-term challenges that have continued to keep us back from being where we want to be? So thinking about this, I set out to think about sustainable tourism. And when I'm thinking about sustainable tourism, I'm talking about the positive impacts, maximizing those positive impacts of tourism, particularly for those people who must deal with the negative impacts on an everyday basis. I'm talking about economic impacts like jobs, tax revenues, things that keep our economy running, core to what we do and how we support our communities. I'm talking about social impacts. How do we make it easier to get around on these roads? I'll tell you what, I will be a lot more patient with traffic in Raleigh after spending a summer out here driving up and down 12. At least you're moving on 40. It may be 95 miles an hour, but you're moving. Okay. These social impacts, we want to make this not just a great place to visit, we want this to be a great place to live. For everyone who works here, everyone who makes this place their home, we want it to be a great place to live. And we cannot forget about our environmental resources as well. The quality of our water, the quality of our beaches. That is key to what brings people here. We must keep that at the center of what we do. So for me to learn how to get to this future, I was given the opportunity, a fantastic opportunity, an opportunity that so few people in my position are given, to come out here and be a part of this community for 2 months. And in those 2 months, I sought to learn. I sought to listen. I sought to hear from the people who live with us every single day, to find out what it's like and how we get to the future they want for tourism. So to do this, I had many conversations. I don't know if you all can tell this, but I like to talk. I'm a talker. So talking to people is something that comes naturally to me, and I can learn so much just by sitting down and having a conversation with folks. So this summer, I sought to talk to as many people as I could. I ended up talking with 40 tourism stakeholders. Work that out on your fingers. That's about one a day for 2 months if I'm taking some time off, right? So I was working. Everyone says, oh, you're at the beach this summer. I was working at the beach this summer, okay? Talked to 40 people all up and down the Outer Banks, all the way from homeowners in the 4-wheel drive area down to Ocracoke. So I got our full geographic range because we know each one of these communities, each one of our counties is very different, very unique, has many unique challenges to think about. I also sought to talk to as many people from different roles, different positions in the tourism industry and the industries that support tourism. So healthcare, finance, talking to those folks who support tourism in an indirect way as well. But talking to everyone from our business owners, people who own and operate our attractions, our retail, hoteliers, restaurateurs, as well as our frontline employees who are dealing with these impacts every day. Talking to our elected officials, the decision makers, people who have a lot of thinking to do about these challenges, to hear their insight on this as well. So These opportunities, the opportunity that I had to talk with these folks yielded great insight. I talked to people about the challenges, the opportunities, where they want tourism to be in the future. And I was able to identify some short, mid, and long-term impacts, or excuse me, long-term recommendations that can maybe help us start to move towards that future that we want for tourism in the Outer Banks. So here's what I learned. Go ahead, Ben. First, we need to center our efforts on sustaining a tourism workforce. What I heard time and time again from the people that I spoke with was, I'd love to be open 7 days a week. I'd love to be able to do lunch and dinner service, but I don't have the staff. This points to an issue that is longstanding. Bringing people here to live and work in the Outer Banks has been a long-term challenge, but it has come to a head, and we have seen the threshold, the throttle, the bottleneck that we have with workforce this summer in particular. So hearing that time and time again, I found that this is an area that really needs our focus. The workforce needs to be prioritized, not just for the sustainability of our tourism industry, which drives our economy, but for the communities themselves. By putting the workforce at the center of our decisions and thinking about all the policy and planning that we need to do, we are not just helping tourism, we are helping our communities. We are ensuring that we have a population of people who will go to the volunteer fire department, who will coach our little league teams, who will be a leader, perhaps run for office one day. These are people that we need in our communities, and they here will work in the tourism industry. What I heard as a real underlying challenge for this issue of focusing on the tourism workforce is available housing. Housing is a key issue for anyone living and working in the Outer Banks. Think about our Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? The very bottom, our basic needs, most basic needs, shelter. We must have shelter, then we can move up to thinking about bigger and better things. So if we're going to prioritize our workforce, if we're going to make sure that we have people who can keep the industry running, who can remain the heart of the tourism industry, we must ensure that they have a place to live, that they feel safe and they can consistently stay in these places. I heard many stories this summer of challenges that people face with housing. And if you'll advance. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, depending on how you look at this, we are not alone in this challenge. Many different destinations face these issues. There on the left, you see an example from Maui and Hawaii, and on the right, Colorado. So, go ahead, Ben. My first recommendation is to start thinking about how we can learn from these other communities. Who else is dealing with these same challenges, and what opportunities have they found to address them? I've reached out to friends I have in Colorado and in Hawaii to say, hey guys, what are we doing? Send me the resources. Let's get this started, see what we can learn from these other places. So this is a short-term action, something we can do right now to start thinking about how we center our decision-making on the tourism workforce. More of a midterm action, something in the next 2 to 5 years for us to think about, is to prioritize the resources for that essential housing, to address that need for our workforce, to get them into the homes that they need to be able to live and work and be a part of this community. Okay? This is going to require money. This is going to require time. This is going to require a marshaling of resources from across our communities to make this happen. And we're seeing it start in some places. Ocracoke, for example, has started an affordable housing task force. They're looking at opportunities to house people there because they realize the shortage of houses is limiting their growth for the industry. So let's replicate that and think about where we can do that in other places. Go ahead, Ben. Secondly, I heard from many of the people that I spoke with, wonderful ideas, creative solutions to these challenges, ways to move us forward and have tourism be the force that it can for our communities, bring in all those positive impacts. However, they don't always feel heard. They don't always feel that they have a place at the table to share those ideas, to help identify priorities, and their voice is being lost in the fray. So greater communication could help to prioritize these actions if we're helping to connect those people who have different viewpoints, our homeowners, our frontline employees, our business owners, all have a voice in this process and need to be heard. So a short-term action would be to bring folks together, something like a tourism workforce support summit. Get everyone on the same page in the same room, having a conversation about how do we prioritize, how do we move things forward. Something that we could do very easily within the next year or so. Midterm, next 2 to 5 years. We think about formalizing those communication channels, setting up clear lines of communication between decision makers and the stakeholders who are impacted by those decisions will greatly help to bring people to that table and make sure that they feel that their voice is being heard. Lastly, bringing together all of the pieces of what I heard this summer. There was a constant refrain of things need to change. We need to think about things differently. And when you hear that time and time again, everyone from someone who's waiting tables, working the line at a restaurant, to people who are perhaps don't even live here but own a home, saying we have to think differently. What that says to me is we need a paradigm shift. We need to change our frame of reference for how we think about tourism. And to do that, we need to start thinking from a way of not just tourism challenges, but community challenges. How do we come together as a community, not to solve the problems of the tourism industry, but to make this a better place to live? A way to think about this, the paradigm that could be helpful in changing our approach to tourism, is called destination management. And this is a way of thinking that's been promoted by organizations like Destinations International, which works with communities all over the world to help drive tourism and increase its positive impacts. It's been adopted by many other communities across the United States, across the world. And it focuses on balancing all those wonderful opportunities, growth of visitation, environmental responsibility, and quality of life, while still ensuring that residents and those who deal with those negative impacts of tourism every day are engaged and participate in development and benefit from tourism. Okay? This is a different way of thinking. This is a different way of bringing people to the table. It's a way to start bringing the workforce to the center of what we do. So in the midterm, changing this paradigm, shifting how we think, that's a hard thing to do. That takes time, that takes energy, that takes concerted effort to make that happen. It requires bringing multiple stakeholders together, making sure those lines of communication stay open and people are engaged in thinking about tourism differently. So what we need here in the Outer Banks is someone to do that. We need to establish a role, a position for someone to be that person to help bring those pieces together. Because this isn't something that we can do piecemeal, everyone doing a little bit at a time. There needs to be a concerted and well-defined effort to do that. In the long term, though, we can all start to think differently. We can all think about that definition of destination management, that idea of balancing the benefits, the idea of engaging our stakeholders, the idea of placing at the center of what we do the people who are most impacted by tourism. We can all start to do that. So if we all come back together in this room 5 years down the road, I'm going to check in with all of you and say, how are we doing on that paradigm shift? Are we thinking differently yet? Okay. It'll take time, but I think we can get there. So what I feel that I've learned this summer is how we can be a leader. How we as the Outer Banks can be a leader in sustainable tourism development. We have everything we need. We have an incredible product. We have an incredible team who promotes that product and gets visitors here throughout the year. We have incredible business partners who love this place, who have built their businesses around it, and we have people who want to live and work here. Together, we can be a leader in thinking differently about tourism so that we can achieve that future of sustainable tourism that we all want. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to answering some questions if we have them. And I think Kayla is working on questions from our live stream, if we have anyone chiming in from that. But we'll go ahead and pause to take some questions. All right. Hayes and Jake know this is my favorite part of talking, right? Questions, questions. Don't be shy. No right or wrong answers. I will give you participation points if you ask questions. Yes, Stacy, thank you. Mhm. Mhm. Great question, Stacy. Thank you. So this was something for me that really started to emerge about halfway through my time and talking with people, after you kind of hear this consistent need for change in paradigm and saying, you know, that there is room to do this, but in my mind, I know that it's going to take a lot of resources to do that. So frankly, it was something that came up in conversation with some folks. Towards the end, I would ask sort of, what do you think about this? But I think not everyone had the chance to chime in on that. So I think we can continue that conversation and thinking about what that would look like, where that could go, who would support that, and what that would really look like. I think this is just the first time sharing it here, and there's lots of opportunities to continue talking about it in the future. Great question. Thank you. Yes. Great question, Leo. That is at the heart of it, right? I think that thinking about the level of visitation, the amount of people we have in certain places, that has to be part of that conversation with changing and shifting. And if we're thinking about, how people are impacted by tourism, traffic is absolutely there at the top of that list. So I think that paradigm shift and thinking about, where we might promote tourism, where we might try and move people in different places, that could definitely be a part of this. Ideally, I think it would help to address that by thinking of creative solutions, finding different ways to reduce that strain on the resources that we have right now. So great question. Thank you. All right, I'm going to take a question here from our live stream. First of all, Mark Johnson, thank you. Go Hokies, and any other Hokies we have in the room. No, Dr. Seacamp back there is one of them. We're all friends here, ACC, whatever, we're good. Joe Cupo asks, have there been impact studies surrounding a new bridge to Kerala, impact study on the 4x4 area? Yes, I definitely heard conversations about the Mid-Kirtuk Bridge. Joe, I think that's what you're referring to. Those conversations are ongoing, and is definitely something, again, with this paradigm shift, that we need to incorporate in that conversation. And certainly lots of conversation about the way that tourism is currently impacting the four-wheel drive area in Kerala. Lots of traffic up there, thinking about what that means for the quality of people's experiences in the four-wheel drive area, the safety of people. That's definitely something that needs to continue to be a part of this conversation as well. Joe, thank you so much for your question. All right. A great question here. How should the Outer Banks balance expansion of affordable housing with short and long-term conservation and climate change adaptation concerns? This is a great question, comes from Anonymous in our live stream, but this is, again, something that we need to be shifting that long-term thinking about what tourism looks like and what that looks like for this area. And climate change has to be a part of that conversation. That is something that when we're thinking about impacts, thinking about those natural environmental resources, and certainly those social and economic impacts that tourism has, that all comes together, and climate change has to be a part of that conversation. So in terms of affordable housing with that, we need to be thinking about that when we're making decisions about affordable housing and what that looks like, and what that will mean for people who may be in that affordable housing. That is certainly a very critical piece of that conversation. So thank you very much for that question, whoever asked it in the live stream. All right. Other questions from our audience here? Another one, Kayla's writing it down for me. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Okay, this comes from Barbara Hertzinger. Do you think that there's requirements for local government leadership incentives for seasonal workers? Yes, so great question, Barbara. Thinking about our seasonal workers and how we think about that for housing with them. This is a crucial part of our tourism workforce out here. This, if we're going to sustain, if we're going to continue to think about this and how we get enough people in our communities to keep tourism running through the peak season, there's definitely a need to think about that as well. In terms of what that looks like in terms of tax incentives, Barbara, I think that's a great idea to continue to explore. And it's not something that came up in the conversations that I had with folks this summer, but something definitely to continue to think about in the future. I think we'll take our last question here from Mark Johnson. Andrea is going to come up and wrap us up after I respond to this. But much of what you speak about points to land use planning questions and policies. Add that to a linear pattern of development and transportation with limits functionality. What is your thought on the question of carrying capacity for Outer Banks infrastructure limits, and how high is up regarding economic development? I think at the core of that question are the limits on the infrastructure. This is definitely something I think gets back to your question, Leo, about the traffic levels and thinking about what we can sustain out here. And frankly, in thinking about that paradigm shift to destination management, we're thinking about what are those thresholds? Where should we be? What can we continue to manage in a way that allows for those experiences and allows for the quality of the experiences that people have in this community, while also thinking about the impacts for our residents? And infrastructure is definitely a part of that. Certainly our traffic affects the people's experience, the way that they enjoy the Outer Banks. So if that is, the bottleneck, that is probably something that we need to be thinking about to ensure that we continue those economic impacts while also making it better for those who live here and work here. So great question, Mark. Thank you so much for that. And all right, I'm going to turn it over to Laura, I guess, and not Andrea, to wrap us up. Thank you again all so much for your attention and your time this evening. I thoroughly enjoyed sharing my experiences with you, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.